Faith and Unleashing. I'm your host, Jared Bueller. Thought I'd do something a little bit different today. And I wanted to tell a story. And this story is something I knew a little bit about before, but only recently I've come upon the full details of it, and thought it would be good to share. It goes right along with your Phil Schneider stories and Olaf Jensen going inside the Hollow Earth, and Andrew Bucegi, time travel and things like this. This goes right along with that, and I'd have to say that I'm going to put this one right up there at the top. It's pretty incredible. But you know, I figured that I find a good spot here, and I'm out by this swamp and for a backdrop, and I figured that I would tell a story. So that's what I'm going to do. And this story comes out of Romania. And some of you may have heard about it before, at least parts of it, but I'm going to tell the whole thing best that I can, and kind of describe some of the stuff that happens in it. But it's a true story, and a lot of you might find it fascinating. It's pretty cool. It is written by and surrounded by some New Age ideas, and the author is, but it also has references inside that point out to biblical truths and things like that that are good, and you'll notice during the story. So anyways, but I'm going to tell this the best that I can, so here we go. All right. During the early stages of America history, during the rocket ages and stuff like that, there was a lot of the main guys that were starting this were into the occult, and were doing different practices and messing around with stuff that had to do with the paranormal and things like that. Out of these different things, and of course Operation Paperclip and stuff that brought the Nazis over to America, this allowed for a lot of that to happen, which was basically a continuation of what the Nazis and stuff were messing around with. But anyways, a lot of your projects and things like the Montauk Project got started during these times, and during the 60s, 70s, 80s and stuff like that. If you guys know what that is, the TV show Stranger Things on Netflix was made after the Montauk Project, and they later changed the show's title from Project Montauk to Stranger Things, so that it was more catchy or whatever, but it goes along with the same idea. They were playing around with paranormal, psychic abilities, trying to enhance things, create super weapons and stuff like that, Cold War era stuff, and really messing with it. What people don't realize is there was other groups around the world that were also doing the same thing at the same time that these were taking place. And this story takes place in Romania. In 1968, Romania started their own projects, and they had their own secret group that they were working on creating enhanced psychic abilities and other paranormal enhanced humans, and recruiting them into black projects and things like that were taking place. And they started this in 1968. Now, this story that I'm telling you was written and published by a Romanian writer by the name of Radu Samara, all right? And it was in Romania for a long time until around 2009, when a guy by the name of Peter Moon took the story and was able to get it and put it in English, and he brought it over to America and stuff like that. And anyways, the story is out of Romania. So anyways, but the story is told from the author who's writing it, hearing the story from the main character, where all these events take place. And so it's a little bit tricky to tell it because it's not a first-hand account, even though there are parts where it is a first-hand account. He's telling it basically from third person, hearing from this character who was in this project by the name of Caesar Brad, which is the alias he goes by. But that's kind of like a little bit of the backstory here. But anyways, Caesar Brad was born in 1970 in Romania, and from all he knew, he was born to a regular mom and dad. And at the time of his birth, when he was on the table and coming out, the doctors didn't think anything of the sort. But one of the first things the doctor noticed was that he had an extremely long, overly linked umbilical cord that caught the attention of the doctor. He'd never seen anything like it before. And from this point on, when the doctor went in to cut the umbilical cord, he took the scissors and they slid off the umbilical cord. They wouldn't cut through it. So he took another pair and then another pair. After 3 attempts with no avail of the scissors sliding completely off the umbilical cord, being some sort of extremely movable but dense material, whatever the umbilical cord was made out of, he finally got a scalpel and was able to press extremely hard and cut the umbilical cord. After this happened, the doctor got a hold of a colonel, one of the top colonels or whatever in Romania, and had him come to the hospital to investigate the situation. Now, right off the bat, hearing that, it tells me that since the project had already been going on since 1968, military and stuff like that and government had already gotten a hold of doctors and hospitals and told them to look for anything peculiar in people, because they clearly had a colonel on standby. So the colonel shows up with the team and they check the boy out by the name of Caesar Brad, and the parents, Smirna and the dad, Nikolai, I believe, are both basically bribed and persuaded. They already had a history on the dad. They knew they could be bribed with money and stuff like that, and the wife could. And they were told nothing more than to just cooperate. They'd be paid accordingly, but to report monthly on anything that happened with the child, and if there was any developments or anything that were strange or out of the normal with this child, Caesar. So they took him home and things stayed normal for the most part. Well, as time continued on, they noticed that the kid never made an attempt to talk, never said anything. He was very quiet and to himself. And time progressed on further and further without anything going on. He would get his monthly updates where the parents would say things, but it was never really anything that would draw the attention. Well, after a time, the mother, who liked to do drawings and paintings and stuff like that, I think around the age of like 2 or so years old, it might have been 1, drew nothing more than a few circles and lines and put it on the fridge with magnets. And Caesar, his attention was immediately drawn to this drawing. It didn't seem different or anything else out of the ordinary, but it caught his attention right off the bat, and he sat there staring at it in front of the fridge without blinking for hours and hours. And the mom and the dad both tried to pull him away from it, but he wouldn't pull away whatsoever. So after a time, they tried to lift him up and give him something to eat, and he would start crying profusely, and they couldn't figure it out. So they ended up calling the colonel, who brought a team in, and this is the first time that the scientist out of Red China by the name of Dr. Jing is mentioned, and he comes and he checks the child over, looks in his eyes, pupils and everything else, and tells the parents that he's okay and not to worry about it. And after about 24 hours of him staring profusely at this drawing on the fridge, he eventually stops and then decides he wants to get something to eat and stuff like that. Well, time goes on, and he gets to be about the age of 3 years old. And during a party that the family's having with relatives and stuff like that, he finally utters his first words, and he says out loud to everybody when it's going on, I want to be able to think. And from this point on, he's able to coherently talk perfectly in sentence and everything else. And it astonishes everybody and everything like that. But he's able to talk, and he starts to ask, as time goes on, interesting questions that have to do with, where their thoughts come from. In depth, really, thought of questions. Where do thoughts come from? Where do they go? Really thinking about how life works and things like that. And the parents didn't think too much of it or anything like that, but he spent a lot of time by himself. During this time, Caesar, who's telling the author of this, begins to say that he is able to start to tap into other places and stuff like that during meditation and stuff that he's able to find on his own. And he goes to these places more frequently and things like that, and he's more comfortable in them than being in the regular world, and he enjoys spending time by himself. The way that it sounds like he's tapping into astral planes and things like that have to do with, what Hindu practitioners and things like that mess around with. But anyways, as his time continues on, he grows older and stuff like that. Well, in school, in one of the lower grades that he's in, he has a teacher call the parents, and they go to the school to meet with him because the teacher's, kind of a little bit on the distraught side. and the teacher tells him that they'd been going over poetry, and that she'd want Caesar to say his part with the rest of the class when he refused to do it. And after reasoning with him for a few minutes, she asked him why, and he said, "Why? I already know the poem." And she says, "That's impossible, you know." Where she makes him stand up in front of the classroom, and he recites the poem word for word and exactly how it's supposed to be. In astonishment, she reads another poem once to him, and he's able to do the whole thing again and again and again, and she's never seen anything like this before. It's absolutely perfect recitement and memory of each of the poems that he's been given. And it startles the teacher, and she calls the parents, and the parents try to shrug it off and not make a big deal about it, but they do report it back and stuff. Time goes on, and another family get-together happens where an aunt shows up, and Caesar takes notice of one of the aunts that's there, a family member at the house, and he goes up to her and he says, "Whatever you do, do not drive back tomorrow where you are in another part of Romania where she came from." Well, he makes it absolutely distinct that she cannot drive back the next day. Well, after discussing with him that she took a train and everything will be okay, you know, he goes over it. But the rest of the house notices and they sees this whole situation. Well, the next morning, she misses her train ride, and without even thinking of it, asks a friend for a ride. And in the process of this, she's on her trip back home. They get into a car accident and she dies. And Caesar had already seen this and known about it and had warned her not to take the car. And the whole family recognized what had happened. And it's just some of the stuff that started happening as this kid started growing up, right? So time goes on and he starts getting up into higher grades and stuff like this. And I believe this is around close to 1980 now. So he's about 10 years old or so. He was born in 1970. He was coming home from school, and he had left early because he had an issue that had happened at school and it bothered him. And he came home and he went to his usual room, walked by his mom, didn't think anything of it. And while he goes into his room, he goes into another meditation like he usually does before. And he said it was becoming harder and harder to get out of these places that he was going to. But anyways, in the process of going into this one, he starts to come back out after a few hours of being in it. And he notices, without really having much control, when he starts to open his eyes, he's hovering off of his bed about 3 feet in the air. And right around this time, the mom calls him in for lunch and walks into the room, and in total shock and disbelief, she sees Caesar hovering off of his bed in the room. She falls back against the wall. He's in shock. He falls down on the side of the bed. She doesn't say anything more of it. Later, when the husband gets home, she tells him what had happened, and after a little bit of discussion, they decide to call the colonel. Immediately, they bring in another special team without Dr. Jiang. They come in, grab the kid, and escort him out of the house. This is the last time he ever sees his parents. And they take him away to a top-secret facility, and from there they start working on the kid or whatever, and they put him into one of these projects, this Romanian, kind of like exactly what we had going on in America with the Montauk Project and stuff like that, in a secret base. And from this point on, he doesn't see him anymore. And anyways, that's the last time. And he ends up going into this facility, which is basically like a X-Men facility that he describes as having other individuals, a few adults and a few kids, that he doesn't talk about all of them, but a few of them, and some of their abilities and things that they can do. So, right off the bat, Dr. Jiang is working at the facility, and he starts to mentor Caesar and teach him more abilities and things like that. The guy has practice with the occult and stuff like that, and he's trying to open up his mind and give him more abilities and enhance the ones that he has. He already has an extremely psychic power of being able to look into people and see other things like that, but he's going to enhance it even further. Along the way, he meets a couple characters, and he talks about one of them by the name of Edward in this facility. Is a kid a little bit younger than him, has a psychic ability that Caesar can feel right off the bat, but he has a telekinesis ability where he's able to move objects around him and things like that in his room. And he has a presence around him that's calm, that you can feel, but when he gets angry, sparks start to light up around his head and around his body. And he's able to destroy and crush things and things like that around him, kind of like the Force, right? Like off Star Wars. And all his room is basically made with wood and plastic items, because some of the stuff that can get destroyed, it would be easier to replace with wood and plastic, he describes in the story. And anyways, he ends up enhancing his abilities more, and he can end up pulling water out and forming a spherical ball that hovers in the air and move things around the room and stuff like that, objects. He ends up going to another facility. He doesn't see him anymore. During this time, this colonel, a new colonel, takes over by the name of Colonel Obadiah, and he really takes Caesar under his wing, and he likes him a lot, and kind of works with him, but they kind of build a friendship along the way, along with this Dr. Jing that helps Caesar out. Well, one of the other characters, children by the name of Octavian, is about the same age as Caesar, has the ability to look into the futures. 10 to 18 hours or so into the future with pinpoint accuracy, and describe different things like that. This kid has a guard on him at all times, a certain security team, and only through some sneaky ways is he able to discuss it. But a lot of the reasons why is because anybody that be trying to get out of the facility or anything like that, you could talk to this kid, and basically you could have a game plan, know where the guards are and stuff like that, and basically see the future for an escape. So he has armed guards stuff around him all the time, and they kept him away from a lot of the other kids and stuff like that. Through training, he's able to take his telepathy of looking into the future to up to 28 hours, but nothing past that. He knows him for a while, and after a while even Octavian gets moved to another facility. Well, as time goes on and his powers and stuff start to progress, and he gets more abilities, he grows more and more close with the Colonel Obadiah, and describes how they build a friendship and stuff like that. But during 1986, Colonel Obadiah takes Caesar on a secret trip where he tells the rest of the facility, which is now called Department Zero, that they're going to, because of distraught reasons, going to go visit Caesar's parents, which he actually doesn't do. He takes him to Bucharest, to a secret monastery where he visits a priest from this monastery that's well known around the area, and this priest's name is Arseny Boca, and he's well known at the time, and the Communist Party that was running the show there in Romania at the time, they kept close eyes on him and stuff like that, because of they don't want any overpower or anything like that, and also they were trying to keep control of the Christian church and stuff like that. But this guy had some serious influence, and he was well known around there about being a powerful spiritual leader and stuff like that. Anyways, on this secret mission, Colonel Obadiah takes Caesar to go meet this priest. When he walks in, he ignores Caesar at first, but talks to the colonel. But Caesar describes that he could feel his presence immediately, and his aura and spiritual essence that he has. And even though the book is written in a type of New Age sort of, and the story is told from sort of a New Age perspective, there is different elements inside that understand the conflict between good and evil, dark forces, God being real, Satan, and the bad guys and the good guys that work for both. And he notices this guy, this priest, is extremely wise, and he can feel already that while he's on earth, his spirit is already basically in heaven. He's basically on standby. The priest turns and looks at him and tells him what their plan's going to be, but he instantly recognizes who he is, and they have a discussion for 3 hours where they talk to him and the colonel, and Caesar learns that they're going to have an important event that's going to take place in about 20 years, which turns out to be about 17 years, but 20 years in the future, and they were going to both rely on each other, and the priest gives him the blueprints of what they're going to have to do to combat the forces of evil. He tells them that there's a plan in the works to assassinate him through poison, and he's not going to be on the earth much longer, but he's not going to fight it because he has every intention of going to heaven and where he belongs. But he describes to him this priest has extreme spiritual impact on Caesar, and he takes it into note, and the whole religious aspect. And from the way it sounds of it, I'm guessing that he gets in tune with the story of the Bible, God, and everything else, because he recognizes that it's real. And even though the author being told this story is a little bit scratching his head because he doesn't at the time, Caesar's telling him this stuff, and he just takes it at its word for the time being. So after they have this meeting, he tells them about the future and what they're going to do. They leave the place, and only a few times does that priest sneak down and talk to Obadiah in the following years. But right before the revolution that takes place, where there's a change of power in 1989 in Romania, where they lose one of the leaders and another one steps in, that priest ends up dying, the Arseny Boca, and he goes away. But anyways, But up to that time, Caesar continued his training and always thought the thoughts of what it was going to be that they were going to be used and stuff like that. Interesting enough, he finds out that that priest had told him about the very story that I'm telling you now, and the author, and how he was to find him in the future, and how they were going to get the story out and things like that, because the world was going to need to know it. And it was the one way that they can combat evil. Evil's constantly trying to keep things under wraps and secret, and they believe that if they could get the information out, even if it was a small percentage, then that's enough to fight back by knowing the truth. So anyways, in 1989, they have a switch of power, and because Department Zero is so compartmentalized, so secretive and everything like that, they don't really feel the fluctuation of power that takes place, or the change of it. Obadiah puts himself in the right positions and places he needs to, and he's able to maintain a position of power inside the department. During this time, though, and this change of leadership and all the different people that have tried to get into it, that they've been able to block and keep out through different means, Obadiah is able to put Caesar in charge of this department at the youngest age ever, and he takes over as the head department leader of this Department Zero. And he's now able to get access to all the secret archives, all the secret stuff that goes on, and able to research all of it. So he basically does just that. He goes through all the archives, reads, catches up on anything like that. They end up devising parts inside this facility, where there's a B team, A team, and they have a special military group that's able to come through, and they use when they go out to these secret locations and things like that that they find, okay? So like the same thing, you know, with different things, Sphinx, pyramids and stuff like that. Anything that they find over there, they send in the team, they assess it, and if an A team needs to come in, they'll switch out the B team, bring in the A team, which Caesar runs and is spear pointed of, and he's the lead operator in that situation. They go out and they check the situation out. Some of the stories that they had were pretty interesting, and one of them being during a rock climbing incident with two brothers climbing up the rock. They climb up over a face and are trying to get to an opening, and they notice some old writings and things like that that are on the rock wall. Well, in the process of getting up there, the one brother notices a strange gold chain or something like that that's hanging out of the rock. When he reaches down to touch it, he instantly disappears and they can't find him. This throws things into pandemonium, and they call up an investigation team and stuff like that. That being an expert climber himself, goes back and checks the situation out, goes up there, and why the whole team is there looking and everything like that, and which would basically be your 911 situation, you know, cops and research and everything like that, checking out for a disappearance. They're all watching as the dad climbs up the face, and he sees this golden chain and ends up going out and touching it, and vanishes right on the spot in front of about 10 or so people. They instantly block it off and end up bringing in a team where they keep the whole thing blasted off, and for the sake of everybody else around there, they end up blasting the rock face. But this is one of the things that he was able to read on that happened in Romania. So if they can all help it, they try to get in there first and block the things off, you know, just like the government does all over the place, stuff like that. You know, Mount St. Helens blows, they bring in, they find 11 or so Bigfoots, they caution tape it, bring in the body bag, sneak them out of there before the public can do it. The same sort of thing happens in this situation, so they try to get in there, and time progresses on. Well, in 2002, the first meeting takes place between Radu Seminar and this Caesar Brad, and he gets a hold of the guy who's actually writing the story right now, Radu Seminar, and he meets him and tells him at the time the main point of the story that is being led up and what the priest had told them about was going to happen in the future has not taken place. But along with some of the stuff that he was told, this was around the time when he was supposed to get a hold of this guy, the author or whatever else, to make this happen and start working on it. So it goes into the whole project of them getting the information out to the world. At the time, he had not met with any of the head sources of darkness, which I'm going to be describing here in a minute. And so it was basically just getting and prepping for the story that was going to be coming out in the future, which the priest, Arseny, had told Obadiah and Caesar about, and to prepare for in the future as part of a defensive measure against the forces of darkness, which of course the priest, knowing the end of the Bible and everything like that and following it, had been talking about and explained to Caesar that had been going on for thousands of years. But this network, this Hydra, this evil force that was coming out was just about to fulfill their plan, which was going to be world domination, we know as the Antichrist, and was going to be coming out on the scene. It was going to be very, very soon, and this was going to be all part of it and stuff like that. But just like all things, he said it's going to come back around full circle, and that's going to go back to some of the original stuff, which you're going to see, which takes place inside this discovery, inside the Bucegi Mountains in Romania. So, as they have this meeting or whatever, he tells him and catches up on some of the stuff. Right off the bat, this is kind of where the story starts. He agrees to meet this Caesar Brad, and he tells him that, he's got a story and he wants to get it out and everything like that, and he meets him in secret. But the first thing right off the bat, and this really hit home for me, and you guys are going to know why here in just a second. I thought it was very interesting, and it really caught my attention because it's right when the story starts, and everything's kind of telling a backstory to lead up to where they are. When Caesar Brad shows up, Radu is sitting in the taxi. Without saying a word, Caesar sits inside the taxi, and the taxi driver starts it up and drives to the hotel right where they need to go. In complete disbelief and not quite understanding exactly what had happened, and thinking in his mind, Caesar Brad is already reading Radu's mind. And he tells him, what you just saw here was me telepathically communicating with the cab driver. And he's like, he thought that I said it out loud, but I didn't. And what I transcribed on top of his mind was that we're going to this place, take us there, and this is how we need to get there. And he heard it just like he was speaking automatically with his regular voice. But he described how he did it. And this really caught my attention because I thought it was interesting. He explained the normal mind and how the thoughts and things like that are scattered at all times, and our thought perception and everything else. But with concentration, of course, to the help of this Dr. Jiang, this Chinese guy that helped Caesar with his abilities and stuff like that, he was able to develop his abilities to talk telepathically to other people and at least put the ideas inside their mind and stuff like that. He says once the thoughts or unscatter anymore and you're able to direct them on the spiritual level, it looks like a white laser about 2 to 3 inches wide, and you project that onto the person's mind, and it looks like a bright white light, and it's about 2-3 inches wide, and it's a laser. Instantly when I heard this at the start of this story, it really caught my attention, because if you guys remember what happened in 2018 when I was walking in the kitchen in March in my brother's house, when I was walking in there, I was talking to God about time and everything like that, and how he had set it up, and the whole gap theory thing that I had a problem with. And you guys know that he told me that he'd folded time out from the center. And I've told this story before, but if you guys remember right, what happened at that time was, I saw instantly in a third-person perspective a white laser shot out of heaven right into the back right side of my head. And hit the back there, and it looked just like a white light, like a white laser, and that's exactly what he's describing in this book. And it really kind of hit home, because I didn't think anybody had ever seen anything like that, and now this guy's describing it, using it in that very same thing, which is how I was talked to in that point, except it wasn't from a human, I heard it from God. So I thought that was very, very interesting. And there was a few other parts inside this story that really caught my attention, that shows some of the stuff that they've messed with, they're really tapping into stuff that's actually real, and it's very, very interesting. But anyways, after he tells them this, they have their first meeting and stuff like that, and it's one of the things that, like I say, that caught my attention. But he talks to him about time and our perception of time, and there's multiple different things that happen during this story that I can't, of course, remember everything, but I'm just going over the gist of it. So during the first meeting, that becomes the end of it, and he only has what he has so far to work with, what he's told them and everything like that, but he's waiting for more parts of the story. So in 2003, during a regular day, Caesar gets off the phone with Obadiah, who calls him on the emergency phone. He's surprised because they just talked the day before, and he doesn't call on that unless it's an absolute emergency. Well, Colonel Obadiah calls up and he's a little bit distraught, and he tells him, hey, there's somebody that's coming to meet you in about an hour. There's no control over it. I don't know who he is, but they've just opened basically all the doors into Department 0, and he's coming out of Italy to come meet you. He warns him about it, and he gets off the phone. Caesar goes into basically a meditation to see if he can pull any information out of there from out of the universe, right? Tries to get some idea of who he's about to talk to, but doesn't really figure it out, okay? In about an hour, this guy lands in a helicopter, and he's a guy about 65 years old, dark figure. You can kind of imagine a male version of Cruella de Vil, right? The guy's got certain features that look diabolical right from the start. and he can sense that the guy has strong psychic powers and other abilities and stuff like that that are over him, but it's all darkness, complete darkness. And anyways, he agrees to meet him and says that they can talk in Department Zero, but this guy with the name of Venerable Mazzini, which is what he ends up calling himself, all right, out of the top Mason lodge out of Italy in the world, says no, they're gonna have to have their meeting in private. So they end up going outside the building and getting a circle or whatever where they have a table set up and guards and stuff like that, and there's no cameras or anything like that. And this Venerable Mazzini starts to disclose what is going on, and he tells him who he is. He's one of the highest orders of the Mason Lodge in the world. Basically, he's a member of the Bilderberg, and I think he's either top or second or something like that in command. Absolutely pure evil. And he starts to describe what their agenda is, how they've been keeping an eye on him. And Caesar Brad, for some time, they'd already known about it, watched his abilities grow and things like that, and they've been watching from the background. These guys had control over the complete world, and they go on to tell him that they would like to recruit him into the Masons for his abilities and things like that, and basically he wouldn't have a choice in the matter. Caesar trying to figure out what this was, and a long time ago already realized the forces of darkness and the punishment, and actually the way that it hurts you and taking away from abilities and things like that has never been one to be bought off or anything like that. So he doesn't want to have anything to do with this, but at the same time the department has given him all kinds of leeway to go into these secret places and stuff like that he does not want to lose, and he knows that if he goes against this Venerable Mazzini, he could have his power possibly taken from Department Zero, and they could put somebody else in there with sinister and nefarious ideas. So he goes into a plan to play along with it. And basically this Venerable Mazzini, this dark figure, goes on to describe exactly what they're doing and their goal, and tells them about the Masonic Order, how they've been around since basically the very beginning, and they control the world. Everything that they do is pure evil, how they've set up a, they hate the middle class and they want to destroy it, obviously, but they want to have only an extreme high class and a lower class. They've created all the instability in the world. They fund both sides of wars. They're part of all the diabolical stuff that takes place around the world. And the Masons are, of course, in charge of this. They have lodges in every single town, and the lower levels don't know about it. And there are different tiers. They have this hierarchy of power, has lower levels that do the work, keep the lodges and things like that. And if they play right and go through all the procedures, they get brought up to levels like second levels. Most of your presidents and things like that are in the second level, second tier, which go up to the 33 degree. Beyond the 33 degree gets into the Venerable Mazzini area, where this guy that's talking to him, these guys are members of the Bilderberg and other organizations. They don't want to be known. They don't like media press or anything like that. They work behind closed doors, all right? These are bloodlines and things like that you know about, different names that have been ruling the world behind the scenes for a long, long time. Of course, Rothschilds, Astor, Bundy, Merovingian, and stuff like that, all right? And they keep these bloodlines going the whole time as he describes to him and tells him this whole thing. Caesar kind of has an idea about it and stuff like that, but he continues on and kind of plays dumb through the whole thing while this bad guy discloses all their secrets and stuff like that. Caesar asks during the time, what's to think that I wouldn't say something about any of this? The Venerable Mazzini tells him, you already work in a secret department, and at birth, all your records and stuff were destroyed right on the spot. When the colonel came in and talked to the doctor, they had him destroy all his birth records and stuff like that. And it's like, even if you were to talk to the outside, who would believe you? It's just absolutely ravenous. The stuff that I'm going to tell you about and I'm talking about, the world wouldn't believe anyways. So he was like, okay, point made. And they continue on, and he tells them that their highest members and things like that control, tobacco industry, alcohol, beverages, and everything else that's bad for you, pills and stuff like that. They work to create viruses to keep population down. They're behind all the creation of viruses and stuff like that take place, and all the death and destruction that happen with that. They want to keep population down because it's easier to control, and their ultimate goal, and that he describes to Caesar multiple times, is to have absolute power. Of course, without God or anything like that. They want to destroy all of it. They want to be absolute kings and rulers, and it absolutely have control from the very birth that you were born all the way until you die. Control and manipulation over each individual. They put people in endless jobs. that amount to nothing, and they trick them into doing this and working while they give them these bribes and offers through media and stuff like that to compare yourself to the Joneses and things like that, where you're constantly working to enslave yourself, never stepping out of this, and you're blinded to the real truth where you can actually make a difference and stuff like that. You're constantly working for them, but no matter how hard you work, no matter how much of the slice of the pie you get, you're never going to reach their levels. And even the highest levels that they have of Masons that they've manipulated, they only bribe them still with the power, but the real guys at the top, they only give them the idea that they can make it if they keep working, keep cutthroating enough that they'll make it to the top. They'll never actually get it there, and through this manipulation, they're able to control that the whole entire time. They control the Lions Club and Rotary Club, and these are just little groups and things like that to do biddings and stuff like that, where they're giving people a little bit of power and they taste it, but because they are promoted to these top positions, they don't want to lose it. They think they're a part of that while they're promised that they'll go higher. You know, you really see the resemblance exactly here that George Lucas put in Star Wars with the Emperor. You know, how these guys are promised in Dooku and stuff like that they're going to make it to the top, but they just get their heads cut off later because he has no plan of sharing power in the first place. And it's the same thing, of course. The very venerable Mazzini at the same time is working for Satan, you know, and they're all going to get their throats cut at the same time too. The whole thing is just completely built on lies and deception and betrayal, just absolute betrayal the whole time. But as it describes this whole thing and where the world is and stuff like that, they say that every single U.S. president, by the way, is controlled by them. They pick every single one, and only those that are toe the line in their Masonic lodges get to be president. So your Trumps and everything like that, they're already picked before they get in. And of course, this plays into why in 2016, when I was praying to God about Trump, I was told let the dead bury the dead. They were already picked and stuff like that. The whole thing's been a psyop the whole time, and they're continuing to run that psyop because, as their venerable Mazzini explained, division is their ultimate goal. You know, if they can keep dividing, they can conquer and everything like that. You constantly want to keep division in people. They control the churches and things like that. And I'm not talking about the actual Christian church. I'm talking about your Joel Osteen and stuff like that. These guys are paid off through money and riches and things like that. He also goes on to describe how anybody who's building riches or anything like that, honestly, won't be able to sustain it. They come in and they purposely crash them down, and they're willing to lose funds on their own that they can quickly get back later in court and things like that to completely defund somebody that might be a rival in power or go against their ultimate goal. But usually right before they're about to completely collapse in bankruptcy, they're given one last offer, and usually he said that people take that and they get a miraculous recovery in their finances and they pop back up. All right, it's because they're controlled and everything like that. He describes all of this and basically lays out the whole plan and how the Masons control the whole world, and their highest members are obviously called the Illuminati, and the Illuminati make the choices, and they go out and they pick these different people, and when anybody starts to be somebody that really stands out with riches and stuff like that, they'll go in to recruit them. So anyways, he describes all these different things, and Caesar says, what about God, you know, because he already has an impact from this priest and stuff like that. What about the church? You know, he's like, there are things that go way beyond what you're talking about. And the Venerable Mazzini, which is another thing I find very interesting in the story, because this is not a Christian story, but like I said before, the elements very well have all the stuff that lines back up with the biblical narrative. The Venerable Mazzini says, the Christian church is our greatest enemy that we face. Right? And of course, all of you that are Christians and stuff like that should already know that, because those that are walking with God are the ultimate weapon as Christians against the forces of darkness, to shed light into the world, to share love and truth and everything else that we do, and to be weapons. All right, that's what we are, if you're doing the right thing. Okay, they've obviously manipulated lots of different things and tried to put the whole meek attitude on people where they're pussified, which is what you see in nowadays Christianity. It's what the difference is when you hear me talk and when I'm talking about taking people out compared to your normal Christians that would be beat up if a plastic bag accidentally bumped into them in a windstorm. Okay, so anyways, he goes on to describe this, and the meeting stops. All right. Well, as he played dumb during the time, the Venerable Mazzini tells me, you know, during our next meeting, I'm going to tell you exactly why we had this meeting, this secret meeting. And you're not going to really have a choice. You're going to come in, and you're going to be a part of our group. He offers him wealth and power, you know, riches, finances, control of government, anything he wants. And they're going to put him in one of the top echelons. Caesar says, well, you know, what makes you think I want to be a part of the Bilderberg or anything like that? The Venerable Mazzini snaps back and says, who thinks that you're even going to be a part of that? That's something you would have to earn or get into. But because of your abilities and stuff that we already know about, we will put you in the upper echelons. You will be the top part of the Mason lodges or whatever, and you'll be running that show, and from there you'll have unrestricted abilities to go places and do whatever you want if you work for us and stuff like that. Same satanic bribery that Satan, you know, tried to offer Jesus, that Jesus turned down. Caesar plays along with the idea, you know, but he has no intention of doing it. So the meeting ends. Caesar goes into some research, and through some different means ends up discovering that not only why he was playing dumb the whole time to play against this Venerable Mazzini, who he said had extreme psychic abilities and dark force and power and stuff that he could feel, but he finds out that the Venerable Mazzini already knew that he was playing along in the first place. That stumps him for a while, only to the point where he finally realizes why they are so desperate to get in here to find out what's going on that they haven't told me about, that they're willing to dump all their cards on the table, and that's why they're playing along like this in the way they are. They're basically playing a mental chess with each other, all right? But he doesn't know what it's all about until the next meeting that he has. Okay, during the next meeting, this is where it really gets into it, and the point of the story here that happens. He flies in and talks to him, and they get right to the point. He tells him through the Pentagon, the Masons and Bilderberg, they have able through their connections and stuff like that, what they have with people inside the Pentagon and stuff like that, have discovered through satellite imagery a hollow recess inside the Bucegi Mountains inside Romania, underneath the sphinxes there. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the Romanian Sphinx, but the connection to ancient stuff and sphinxes is, you know, pyramids and sphinxes, whether it's on Mars, Alaska, Romania, or Egypt, or anywhere else. So there's always that connection. Well, underneath the Romanian Sphinx that they have in the Bucegi Mountains, they discovered a huge hollow chamber inside the mountains, with a tunnel that goes out for a certain degree and then cuts back to an opening, a starting point, that is blocked by what they can tell is a force field or something like that. And this huge hollow chamber, they have extreme interest in, and they want to get into it. And they're willing to make this whole thing operational, but they need to work with Department Zero to make it happen. Now, Caesar doesn't want to lose any control of the situation because he wants to find out why they're trying to get in there so bad, which the Venerable Mazzini doesn't say. He's keeping it all under wraps. But in the process of it, he says, okay, you know, but we're going to do this my way if you guys want to use Department Zero. So he plays along the best that he can with the situation, and Mazzini agrees to go along with it. But they want to bring in American troops and tech to get inside the mountain to this chamber and check it out. What he discovers is that the U.S. government has already, since I believe 2002 or so at the time, maybe sooner, has discovered another chamber just like it with a force field, tunnel, and everything else under Babylon, around Babylon area in Iraq. And the U.S. government knew about this when they went in there in 2003, obviously. You know, if you guys know the story of that, they went into to the museum, and they got Gilgamesh's body and the power source of the Tower of Babel and stuff like that, but they had also been watching a chamber there, and through all resources and every means that the U.S. government knew how, they could not get through the force field to get into this. So they had only been keeping track of it and on standby, but they didn't know how to. And the Masonic Lodge, I believe, knew that they sounded like knew even more about different locations around the earth where these were at, but this was one of them, and it was bigger than any of the other ones inside the Romanian mountains, right? So he tells them about it and how they want to get in there. So Caesar Brad says to get into this part of the mountain, when he shows him a diagram of it, you know, it's going to take hours and hours of resources to blast and get into the mountains. The Venerable Mazzini says, no, we don't have to worry about that. The U.S. has developed a boring device, if you guys remember the movie The Core, similar to that is able to drill through the rock in no time, and we can get into it. We'll bring them over as part of the resources so that we could get into this chamber and check it out. So they agree to make this team, and through U.S. means and stuff like that, and the Masons running the show, control the military and this faction of it to go over there, where they're able to also keep the project and what they're doing actually secret. So the government, the U.S. government, knows that they're over there doing something, but they don't know exactly what they're doing. They're kept under wraps. Meanwhile, through Department Zero and stuff like that, they're able to keep it away from the government of Romania's intel as well. And they go over to try and get into this chamber. So they bring in the drilling device, but one of the things that Bucegi had already said is they can't get to the force field that starts at the opening of this thing, right, inside the beginning of the chamber. So they're going to try and drill into the side and cut it into the chamber behind the force field. So they start up on the other part of the mountain, and they drill down into it where they hit the tunnel surface, all right? They can't penetrate it at all. Nothing will even scratch it. It's impenetrable, right? If some of you have ever seen the tunnels on Mars, the old ones that had still been left over after the deluge that happened up there, if you guys have heard me talk about it before, that their own deluge, the same time that we had the flood here on Earth, the northern crust of Mars was completely blown off along with tons of ocean water and everything like that. But some of the old tunnels and stuff that they have up there are still structurally intact, and you can see them from satellite imagery. Well, this tunnel is like the same thing. I mean, they can take a beating and just keep on going. They cannot penetrate it. So they then bring the boring device down to the lower level and decide to go up to the front gate of this thing, which is in the middle of the mountain and the starting point of where this force field is and the opening of the chamber that goes to the tunnel, okay? So they go down there and they start to drill through it. And what Caesar describes it as is the thing spins with an extremely hot plasma that comes out of the front of it, and it's basically nuclear, and they're able to, it doesn't melt the rock, but it softens it, and there's a huge magnetic field that they're able to use, which just pushes it out of the way. No dust is created, and basically it just pushes the rock out of the way, and they're able to drill through it like that, super fast, kind of like, almost like the Core movie that I was talking about. Well, anyways, they get through, and they make basically an opening chamber the beginning of this thing that squares up to where it starts, and it's about 3 feet above where the actual tunnel starts. One of the things Caesar describes is how the start of this tunnel where the force field is, there's no differentiation between the rock. It's right in the middle of the mountain, the granite itself, and he can't figure out why a tunnel would start in the middle of a mountain like that. And later, I believe he ends up finding out, and you'll hear in the story what happens or whatever else, but it's right in the middle. And so anyways, they stop the drilling, and they go in there, and there's a team, and 3 of the guys jump down around the first part of the tunnel without knowing it. There's an invisible force field there, the same one that Bucegi had talked about and stuff like that, that they couldn't get through. And all 3 of them, without realizing it, walked right into it. All their bodies get mangled and drop instantly. All 3 of them die, and they halt the project or whatever else, and they can't go any further. So at this point, nobody can get through the force field, and they don't know what to do about it, and they're stuck in the same situation that Bucegi had warned them about, and how the U.S. government in Iraq had dealt with, and they can't get into the starting of this chamber, right? So finally, after some time going down there, the colonel gets brought in, Obadiah, and he touches the force field, and he gets sick to his stomach, and nobody can really touch it. You can lightly touch it, but if you start to go into it, it can be deadly, just like those three diggers had discovered for themselves when it dropped their bodies like that. So anyways, after a time and everybody going up and trying to get around this thing, and only making them sick to their stomach and want to puke and nauseated and disorientated and everything else, they can't do it. Well, finally Caesar decides to take a little trip and check this thing out firsthand. So he goes up to the force field where it is, and he stands there looking at it. And while he's telling the story, what's behind the force field is a rock wall that starts the beginning of this chamber, and the force field's in front of it. And he looks around, all around the wall and around the corridor of this thing, and he notices over on the side there is a little indentation of a protrusion of a rock sticking out in basically a square fashion. It's no different than the rest of the wall, but just sticking out a little bit further, and on it has a triangle diagram on it, and but it's between the rock face that they're looking that starts the tunnel and the force field, and he doesn't know how to get through it. So while he's looking at this force field, he basically describes himself as raising his consciousness or vibration level, and he's able to phase through the force field. All right, granted, at this point, nobody in the world is able to go through one of these force fields. And right when this starts to be told this way, I want to put my 2 cents in. I don't believe this is exactly as much as raising vibration level as it is into a biometric that's already in him. I don't think his birth was an accident, and the whole birthing thing and how it happened, I believe it was all time perfectly for this event to take place at the turning. If you guys know the whole Edgar Cayce stories, and you don't have to get too far into it, about the turn of millennium, they would get into a hall of records, a chamber, all right, underneath the Sphinx or whatever, and it would tell the history of the world, how it really started and everything else. And there would be 3 different tunnels that they could take, and the atmosphere would be lit up with a blue hue. The same thing that like Phil Schneider talks about in the underground bases in Dulce, New Mexico, how they're able to light it up, and how I've discussed on other stories, including Area 51, how they don't need to use lights, they can somehow light the atmosphere up. Well, at the beginning of this tunnel and everything like that, there is no lights needed. Somehow the air is being lit itself in the middle of the mountain underground down there, and they don't know how. Obviously this is taking place, right? And this is Romania, don't forget. So anyways, he raises his level, and he's able to go through this force field, step through it unharmed without getting hurt or getting sick or anything like that. Once he is through, which he says is about a 1/4 of an inch thick, the force field that he could feel, he's now facing the rock wall that's right there, and he goes over and he touches the triangle. Boom. As soon as he does, lights up, force field drops, and the rock wall starts to slide motion without it making any noise whatsoever across the front of this this corridor that's in this this tunnel, this half spherical tunnel that they're going to, without any noise whatsoever. As soon as he touches the triangle, then force field comes back on and it starts to go back across. They don't know how it works. So they sit there and play with it for a while. They bring in some soldiers and stuff like that. Now they have military in Romania there, obviously, that are working together during this deal. And soon as he turns on that force field, anybody behind it between the rock wall starts to get nauseated immediately, and he has to shut it back off. Nobody can handle it. It's like he was specifically made and created for this purpose, to turn this thing on, to start this operation to change the world, basically. So as they all play with it for a while, the generals and colonels and stuff around there can't figure out how the rock wall is able to slide without making any noise or touching the ground or anything like that. They decide that they want to blow it up so they can see the mechanics of it. After Caesar talking, being the head of Department Zero, yeah, he tells them, no, we're not blowing it up. So they decide not to. So they leave it open. All right. After all the monkeying around with the front door, the force field that they've been trying to get through forever, all of a sudden they get a phone call out of the head government of Romania. America's on the phone, and they are pissed off. There's a huge ramble, and it shuts everything down. They end up leaving the cave to get out of there. Come to find out, while they were playing with the triangle button, making the force field and the door open and close, at the same time, the Americans in Iraq, they were watching the secret chamber over there under around Baghdad, underground, that they've been watching, haven't been able to get through. All of a sudden, undid the force field there. They were all connected at the same place all over the world. All of them dropped. And when this happened, a diagram showed up, a holograph that showed up in the imagery right there in front of the cave and everything like that where the Americans were, and it showed Western Europe and Romania and Iraq, and it basically showed a line where they were in the Bucegi Mountains inside that chamber, and drew a map all the way over to where they were in Iraq. And now all of a sudden all the military in Iraq, including the president, which was Bush at the time and stuff like that, knew what the military was actually doing over there, which they had downplayed in a project they were saying they were working with the Romanian government that they didn't know. Now America's on the line with the Romanian government, freaking out, like, what are you doing over there, blah, 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 you know, and they're trying to get the whole thing under wraps. So America flies over, they get into negotiations now in August and September of 2003 for about almost 2 months, where they're yelling back and forth at each other and everything like that. The discovery and everything like that gets brought up to the Romanians. They want to tell the whole world. They want to show it with the world. And the Americans want them to keep their mouths shut, and they tell them, no, absolutely not. You can't share this. They're fighting back and forth and stuff like that. During the process, America offers them into NATO and everything else. This is accurate at the same time that they're brought in around 2003 or whatever else, and they're given military, and they're allowed to have bases and stuff like that, military support, money, finances, and other things like that, but they're to keep it a big secret because there's something there inside there that the Americans want to keep under wraps. And of course they find out what that is more and more. But anyways, they know the whole deal, so they agree to bring in military troops, and now there's a coalition between Romanian forces and American forces to discover what's in the cave and do the research and everything from this point on, okay? So at this point, they're able to transverse down the tunnel, and at this point, Caesar makes another meeting with Radu Simonar, the author of this story, and he's able to bring him in through the colonel and being able to pull strings. And the whole point that Romania wants to tell the world, and they sign in an agreement with America that they'll keep it a top secret, but it's never really forced, and they've always wanted to tell everybody about it ever since it happened. So through this process, they allow Obadiah and Caesar to bring in this writer who's going to tell the story, okay? And Caesar believes if they can tell the story at least to a small percentage of the world that'll believe it, that's enough to basically hold back some of the forces of darkness, which is their goal, to keep everything top secret, which is what, of course, we know the U.S. government does all the time, constantly keeping a big secret about all of it, all right? So anyways, after this coalition of stuff is made, they decide to go into the chamber. Well, what they discover in there, Caesar brings in Radu Simonar. So now this goes from a third-person kind of story that he's telling, and he gets to go in first-hand account. And as he goes in there, he hears the story as Caesar gives them basically a few-hour free walkthrough of the whole thing in the tunnel without the guards or anything like that blocking it. So they start at the beginning of it. He tells them the story about the force field and how they got past it and everything like that. And as he walks down the tunnel, they look at the tunnel, they look at the lighting, the way that everything is, and it goes up for a certain amount of yardage and meters before it makes a sharp turn and goes back. And you can kind of see some more light up there, but they don't know what it is yet at the time. So Radu, the author, asks Caesar, it's like, what is this wall made out of? Caesar's like, we don't know. We can't get anything at all to penetrate it. But he describes it as a type of liquidy looking, almost like glass looking thing, and almost smooth but not completely. And the whole circumference of this tunnel is made out of this, but it's impenetrable. They can't get through it. And that's why they had to go through the force field or whatever else, okay? So what happens is they go down the tunnel and they get to the bend in the tunnel, and Radu is now able to see down where the tunnel makes one last turn and goes into this huge halled chamber, this domed room inside the center of the mountain underneath the Sphinx, right? And you can see the lights glowing in there. It's blue in color and even more bright than what they can see lit in the tunnel. And as they walk down the tunnel, you know, he's describing more things and stuff that's going on. And finally they get to look inside this hall, this huge chamber, all right, this domed room. And he describes it as their huge, gigantic dome, hundreds of meters high, hundreds of meters wide. Inside there, all well lit. And inside of the chamber, there's another dome, and that is covered by some sort of blue force field. It's inside the dome and impenetrable as well, and they believe that it would be able to withstand like a nuclear blast and stuff like that, but nothing could get into it. So they walk up to the front of this dome, inside the dome, which is all electrified looking kind of. And just like you're walking into a store with the sliding glass doors, the force field just opens and they're able to walk through. Caesar explains to him there's no problem or code or anything that we had to do to get into this. He believed that whoever was that put this here back in time believed that if you got through the first trial, which was the force field he walked through, the rest would be open to him anyway. So they walk inside, and inside they get into the good stuff, which is a Hall of Records, basically a chamber of records and stuff of the history of the world and all the other stuff going on. This is where it gets really good. So he describes tables along the outside of the wall, all different, but all about 6 feet tall. Whatever the chamber was made for, it was made for extremely tall people, giants, and they have to have ladders to step up to this because all the start of the tables are about 6 feet high. All right. Anybody who knows the biblical narrative, Nephilim and stuff like that before the flood, you're going to know why this was made for tall people, okay? So anyways, continuing on, they look around, they see a center console in the center of the room, another thing behind that, and then another behind that, and at the far end of the room were I think 6 guards, 2 guards per tunnel. There's 3 different tunnels that go to 3 different locations, and he's about to get the whole walkthrough of the whole thing. So the first table he goes up to, and he's allowed to take a set of stairs that are built up to it, and he goes up and he looks, and a holographic image pops up, shows plant life all over the planet and different things like that, and almost like a chessboard that he can move his hand around. You can look at all the different the plant life and stuff like that, trees, plants, herbs, different things like that all over the planet. And when he goes to put his finger into it, an image pops up of a human body. and the more he pushes his finger into it, it zooms in on different parts, and by moving his finger around, he's able to go in, check the liver all the way down to the atomic level. You can see the biometrics of how the human or whatever works, and then he notices when he pulls his finger out, this human, this holographic image is there that's all like advanced tech, has different scars and things like that that match his body, and then he realizes it is his body. It's showing a display, a biometric readout in a holographic image, a 3D image of his body and all his internal organs, different things like that. You could locate cancers and anything like that instantly and zoom in where the problem is. And when he pulls his finger off, it goes black and goes to different plant life and stuff like that that you could move around and check, that's all over the planet. And then he took 2 fingers and put them on at the same time. When he did this, 2 different things popped up, and it showed their compatibility. I'm talking about like animals and things like that. Not only did it show their compatibility in how you are to merge those animals or different things, but it also shows an image of what that will look like if you were to merge that DNA, all right, together at a molecular level, and what this third creation would look like. If you know what I'm talking about, I'm talking about merging animals and things like that, exactly what they were doing for the flood, before the flood, and what they got busted with. This holographic image, absolutely like electronic computer advanced technology that's ancient, is so advanced you literally can get a displayed readout of what your creature is you're going to build when you mix the 2 things. You want centaurs, you want minotaurs or anything like that. It will show you what animals and stuff you mix and what will happen when you do that, all right? So he gets this whole readout. He's totally blown away. When he steps back down the ladder, he realizes all the other tables are on both sides of the wall of this chamber, which basically has no dimensional feeling to it. It's almost like a liquid sort of like blue glass, but has no depth perception, so it looks like it can go on forever, that he's looking around inside this domed room. But he's then told that the other tables all have to do with different things, while that one had to do with plant life and stuff. There was astronomical ones that have to do with galaxies, planets. You could zoom into any of the other planets and stuff like that in the known universe that they had mapped, and the different layouts of that, along with humans, animals, everything else. There was a table for all different things, and it was also all basically a record of history and all the different tech that they had on it. So absolutely blown away and totally in shock of this advanced technology. They move on from there into the center of the room. Moving to the center of the room, Radu walks up the staircase that they have set there into a platform that looks like it has a seat or a box that you set on, with connectors that look like they go to neural connections to the head and stuff like that. But whoever it was made for was extremely tall, and none of the humans at the time could set on this thing, so they couldn't figure out what this was. They later discover what it is. But anyways, after this point, he steps down and they go behind it. Behind it is a vase, which might look like a Greek vase or whatever else, pretty good size, that is behind this platform. And he's able to look inside of it, and there's this own light shimmering inside with some type of like white goldish powder. And at this point, Caesar cuts in and says that he believes this is what the Venerable Mazzini was after, and why they wanted to get in there first, and that he believed that they already knew about it at the time. It was one of the things that they wanted to collect for themselves, that they were keeping tabs on and all that stuff, right? So he goes down there, reaches in, and he pulls it out, and he asks what it is. And Caesar tells him it's gold. But it's a different type of gold than they've never seen before. He's like, the best way we could describe it is the gold that you see that we have in the present world is 3-dimensional. And whatever this is at the subatomic level is 2-dimensional. It's mixed with something else that we can't figure out what it is. And however this was created, we don't know. But what we do know is this monotonic gold, which is what they call it, if you put it on injuries or illnesses or things like that, will heal it up like that. And they noticed and found out that if you were to take a small amount of this and digest it at certain times, it would turn back the hands of time. You could live for thousands of years or basically become immortal. And they believe the Masons were after this big time, and I can see why, of course, because they want to stay around as long as they possibly can. That's why they're doing all this stuff with turning people into machines, transferring souls to other things, transferring our minds to other things, right? They want to live forever in their own world of forces of darkness too, okay? So anyways, that's what they find out this is. The only way that they later find out this could be created is not in this dimension, but somehow whatever way they were doing it or created, because they can't manipulate it. Whatever it is, this monatomic gold has something else mixed in with it that they can't get a readout of. And it almost reminds me of the black stuff that's on the movie Stargate, the black rock that they use to create the Stargate. They don't know what it is, but of course the world where they get it from is so numerous they don't even have to mention what it is. Whatever this is, it's natural enough that they don't seem to mention it along with the gold, but it's important for it to create this. Anyways, this monotonic gold has to be made in a second dimension. All right, we're currently in the third dimension. There's dimensions higher that you'll experience in heaven and things like that. All right, but whatever way that they were able to do it, whether it's chambers they create or other dimensions they take it to, this stuff is created in a second dimension. It's basically flat in its atomic layout that it's in, and they don't know how it's made or anything like that. They just know the properties and what it can do, and it's very interesting to them. So after this point, Caesar takes him to the last stand that he goes to, and he's able to go, nope, I tell you what, there's one more. He goes to another stand, all right, inside the center of the room. And this one, he goes up, and Caesar tells him, whatever you do, don't push the red button. And as he goes up, he gets a holographic layout of the Bucegi Mountains in Romania and the whole thing. And as he holds his hand over this basically control panel, it's all holographic, this imagery shows up and shows a video of the mountains, and as he holds his hand over it, shows the whole thing flooding over the top of it, the whole valleys and everything like that. And as he holds it further, shows where it'll flood out into the drainages and stuff like that with the red button. They discovered that what it is some sort of self-defense mechanism for the base itself. If you were to have an outside source try to attack the mountains, they had enough control back then. They could control the plates and the aquifers and flood the whole region over the mountains. Almost sounds like the flood of Noah, and then drain it back out into the basin and stuff like that. And there was a 3-part command key, almost like launching a nuke, where you'd have to put it in once you push the red button. But it's one of the things they had, and it was control also over the movement of the earth and everything like that. The tech is just so advanced, it's unbelievable. All right, so anyways, after this he goes to the last stand that they go up, and he's able to go up, and it's the history of the earth, at least how they have written out or have it recorded. And he's not allowed to talk about everything, but he says what he can talk about. And some of the stuff that he said is that the history that we have, that we've been taught in schools and everything like that, the current evolution standpoint, everything like that, it's all a complete lie. He's like, the stories you hear of ancient mythology and everything like that actually happens, that's actually the truth. No matter how far-fetched it is, that's actually what was taking place. And he wasn't able to discuss all of it when he was writing or whatever during the agreements and stuff that they were allowed to have, but he was able to talk about some of the other stuff. He said the way that it displayed out was watching the whole history of the earth and how it played out, but the way that the time worked on it thing, everything was taking place, and you could spend time in it, but the whole operation only took about an hour and a half to happen. And as he watched history go on with dinosaurs, how they were with men and everything like that, right? So it continues on, and it gets to Jesus Christ and the crucifixion and stuff like that. And one of the things that he talked about was like the miracles and stuff that Jesus did were so numerous. He's like, they're not all of them are even mentioned in the Bible. Some of the stuff that I was able to see on the display and things that he did. He's like, another thing that was very interesting during the crucifixion, you could see when Jesus was there, because you got to watch the whole thing and this history of the earth thing, there were people there that weren't from that time. He's like, for whatever reason, they were time travelers, and they were set there in disguise, and they were able to witness the whole thing. Of course, anybody who knows the Andrew Bellagio stories out of Project Pegasus and the other stuff where they're using stargates to go to Mars, they're also working with time travel going back, and they discuss how they went back to watch the crucifixion and stuff like that. During this holographic image that he's able to see of the history of the earth, it actually picks that up, and he's able to see those people back there in that time. As time progresses on further, he watches the whole thing play out, and the 6 guards that are guarding the 3 tunnels at the end, they're standing there with their jaws dropped, and they had already seen it multiple times from other individuals who had went up there and tested the whole thing and got to see all this tech and how it works and stuff like that, but they're just blown away by this whole thing, right? So he watches the whole thing laid out, and the history stops at 500 AD. However able they were to get into there and keep updating the resources and stuff like that, it ends at 500 AD, and that's just as far as that it went. And then he stepped down from this platform that showed the history of the earth and the way that things were they're out on this holographic imagery. So finally, at the end, Caesar shows him the 3 tunnels where the guards are guarding and everything like that. And he tells him, because of the Americans and how they were so fervently about blocking the information coming out. During a part of the agreement, they absolutely are sworn not to talk about the center tunnel and where it goes, all right? So he doesn't tell Radu at the time of where it goes, but he's like, what I can tell you is that we know from holographic imaging on a control panel before you get there at the tunnels, first of all, aren't made like the one that walks into this chamber. They're made out of something else. And he's like, the one on the left goes somewhere to Egypt, we think somewhere around under the pyramids or the Sphinx. And the one on the right goes over somewhere to Nepal, into the mountains over there. And along the way, there's different offshoots, and some of them go to Iraq and stuff like that. So they're all connected, all right? This network of these chambers and stuff, these Hall of Records. And he's like, in the center one, the only thing I can say is it goes straight down deep under the crust. If you guys know what I'm talking about, if you've heard the story of me talking about Hollow Earth and stuff like that, you start to get the idea. The Americans absolutely refuse to share this secret with anybody. So at this point in time, Radu was told, well, time's up, you got to get out of here, but I want you to write about all this and publish it and stuff like that. And Caesar gets the call, and he's to take a certain team, half American, half Romanian, and they're taking the West Tunnel to the Egypt source, and they don't know how it's going to go. They shake hands, and Caesar takes off into the unknown, into the tunnel, and that ends the story, and Radu's left to tell it, all right? Leaves on a gigantic cliffhanger, and the original story that was written in Romania, that's how it ends. Nobody knows what happens, all right? Thankfully, due to times, and now through Peter Moon, who ended up rewriting the story in English after getting the ability to do that from Radu in Romania, turns it into English, and they talk about it, and there's newer details that had happened, which I can now talk about, of course. And what happens was Caesar gets back from that operation, and it does go to Egypt, right under the pyramids, all right, by the Sphinx. And they find another Hall of Records there, okay? And inside this Hall of Records has a lot of the same stuff, but different stuff. They watch another history of the earth, and it shows the history of Egypt and how it was created, and Atlantis and everything else, and all the stories, of course, that the world tries to say about how the pyramids and stuff were built as well. Completely fabricated. It's a total lie. And the real story obviously goes along more biblically and stuff like that, how the pyramids and stuff were made. They have their own Hall of Records. They also have another one of those chambers that was too tall to set in the center of the room, in the one in Romania. All right, but this one looks like it's made more for human size. And after setting in and discovering what it is, Caesar tells him that we discovered that it is a machine that allows you to take your mind and look into the past and the future. You're able to transverse basically the fourth dimension back and forth through time and look at different places, all right? This might help with why the start of the tunnel was right in the middle of the mountains. They knew where it would meet up and stuff like that, along with other things like the Area 51 story, where the guy that was in the underground there for 11 years or so talked about the 27 levels that go under Area 51, but how it was mysteriously met up with tunnels and levels that come up from the center of the earth, and when they built theirs, they perfectly matched with they were. Somehow whoever built them in past knew that they would match up perfectly there, and that kind of lines up with that, with this machine and stuff like that. There was another hovering craft that was there at the same time. Underneath there, it looked like it could move things and objects and stuff like that, but it was hovering off the ground, and they found a few other things, and this is in the Egyptian chamber, okay? And the Hindu one, the one that goes over to Nepal or whatever else, they end up going there, and they end up finding that Dr. Zhang, which left right around the time of the revolution, 89, that Caesar didn't know where he went, which was his original mentor in Department Zero. They end up finding him, meeting him, and he teaches him a few other things and stuff like that, okay, that happened. And that's like another meeting that Caesar has with Radu, okay? Anyways, all this stuff that's taking place around 2003, 2004 now at the time, obviously, if you guys remember my story of the Sphinx in Alaska, all right, and the military group that came in, built the bunkers around, they were looking around and doing research and stuff like that, along with the same time that they also found the pyramid 60 miles west of Mount McKinley that's still active, that has enough energy that's pumping out that can run the electricity in Alaska and all of Canada, okay? Around the same time all over the world, including in Baghdad and Romania and around the rest of the world, all these things were active activating at the same time. If you remember the Edgar Cayce story about how they'd find the Hall of Records, all right, in Egypt under the Sphinx, stuff like that, or have the different tunnels where you could travel. And this would all happen around the turn of the millennium. This is when that happened. So my story actually connects with that, which was happening up in Alaska. That my teacher, that cadre that I had, that happened to witness it when they were up on that glacier, found and discovered they were opening up and getting into all of them at the same time, because basically the force fields were let down when this happened. It's very, very interesting. So anyways, getting back to the last part of the story, finally they are able to take a team and they go into the center tunnel, all right? And when they do, he comes back, Caesar does, and he says it was a absolute success, and they made contact with the inhabitants inside the earth. And Hollow Earth, and this is what the American government was covering up so much, and what they didn't want him to talk about and stuff like that. But during the meeting and stuff like that, they met the inhabitants, which are giants, of course, and stuff like that. And they were invited in. Well, Caesar made such an impression on them that they all invited him to come in. And he made such an impression on them that they invited him to come in and stay. And he is now the ambassador for Earth. To the inhabitants of the Hollow Earth, where he takes up residency in the capital city inside the planet, in the capital city of Eden, all right? Totally crazy. And this took place around 2005 or so, I believe, and he's still in there to this day. And that's the story of this guy, all right? And the story out of Romania. And this Radu, he was told to, write the story down, tell the world and everything like that. The bad guys, what their agenda is, Masons, they control the world. Their agenda to work with Satan, control everything, destroy everything, enslave mankind, kill people all with viruses and stuff like that, and ultimately be the ultimate control, which we know is going to put the Antichrist in charge. And that's what they're going to do. And anyways, how this story fits in, like I see, you can see the biblical different narratives that pop in, but the story is not a Christian story. It is written from a sort of New Age sort of story, so they don't quite understand all the different concepts and things like that, but the ending of it is very interesting, and he finally found his place, and he resides inside the planet basically as ambassador for Earth. It does the counseling back and forth between the inhabitants and the outside of the world, and he's in their main city where they gave him a home and everything else. Pretty wild story. Anyways, the original story out of Romania has been changed over to the American version. It's called Transylvania Sunrise, and it's a true story that happened over there, and their whole different scientific research that they did in the paranormal and stuff like that, and how it led to the discovery of a lifetime over there inside the mountains and the Hall of Records, basically around the earth, and actually where it got turned on from in the very first point, then when it happened. All the different things you hear about in the world, no aliens and stuff like that. Don't ever forget, Obama was coming out in 2009 to bring 5 alien races on the world, and they shut it down at the last minute, all right? The stuff's already out there. Everything they talk about, maybe UFOs and stuff like that, it's all real. All of it is, and these stories only go to prove more of that, of how much the forces of darkness, the governments that we have, lie and keep things under wraps. And it's astronomically huge what the real truth is about everything like that. But eventually it's all going to come out, and the forces of darkness are going to be put in their place, but it all lines up with Scripture. Honestly, it does in every single way, and you can see the different tech that they had, even if they didn't understand it, putting the 2 fingers on the board and seeing how you can merge 2 animals or humans and animals and stuff like that with a holographic image of the outcome. It's exactly what they were doing before the flood, which is why it was caused in the first place, and they're still trying to do that same stuff today. And you can see the history of that in some of the tech and stuff that they had. All right. I also don't think that it was an accident that Caesar was born at that time. I think there was nefarious work behind the scenes that made it happen. I think he has some DNA and stuff that comes from inhabitants from inside the earth, if not fallen angel or something like that, which gave him the biometrics to open the thing in the first place. But they all wondered at their timing, because like I said before, the bad guys know about more when God's coming back and this whole thing starting than the people actually do, okay? And they might have it close to down to the day. Don't forget, during my vision, like I say, UFOs showed up right on the spot, and I'm not the only one that have seen stuff that happens like that around the same time. So the coincidence of all that isn't really a coincidence. It's all timed out the way that this is all actually going down. It's a very unique story, and it's definitely one of the top ones that I've heard about. It's very, very fascinating, especially with the tech and stuff that they found. All this stuff will be kept under wraps, of course. They don't want people to know, and America's leading the charge in that. But the bad guys that are actually working behind the scene, obviously, are the Masons, the Illuminati, and stuff like that, which a lot of people know already at the top, and their Bilderberg groups and stuff like that. So, anyways, very fascinating story, and I wanted to share it just because, you know, I figured it'd be a nice change up on my video to tell a story. And it's pretty wild, and but anyway, true story, and the story, if anybody ever wants to pick it up or read it, it's called Transylvania Sunrise. But it's very fascinating, and anyways, that's it. But anyways, I just wanted to share it, and have a great day. God bless. Bye.